In this tutorial, we're going to make this interesting transition. The transition is a port stroke inspired by an After Effects tutorial by a girl by the name of Olufemi. I will link her video in the description if you're interested in watching it. Okay, let's get started. So I've got a couple of clips that I'm going to use here. So what you need to do is decide at what point you want the transition to happen. So if we say just as he folds his arms, select your first clip, hit Control and B to cut it, and then select the second half, come to the inspector, go to speed change and just hit the snowflake icon. This now makes this into a freeze frame. You can right click this and change clip duration and make it 1 second. So now we're going to bring our second clip in, and again we're going to work out where we want to come in. Maybe here. I'm going to make a cut. I'm going to select this first bit of the clip and again hit the snowflake to make it a freeze frame. Now if we right click and change clip duration, make it 1 second. So if we bring this 1 second clip above our other 1 second clip, she now goes from there and it carries on. So these two clips in the middle are what matters. So drag select both clips, right click and make new fusion clip. What that does is it makes a clip that we can now take into Fusion, which is the After Effects equivalent part of Resolve, and we can manipulate and make our transition. So with your playhead over this clip, come down to the bottom and click the Fusion icon and you go into Fusion. So here we are in Fusion. You've got two media in nodes. One is the first clip and the other is the second. So what is reasonable practice and also will help immensely is to rename these clips so you know which is which. So media in one is the guy, so select media in one, hit F2 on your keyboard and rename it. Media in two is the girl, and we can delete this merge node because we don't need it, and disconnect this pipe because we don't need that at the minute. So we'll work on the guy first. So what you need to do is come to your hotbar in the middle and find this icon which is map control and just drag 2 copies of the map control into your node graph. A map control has many functions, but one of its functions is it lets you mask things out. So to do a mask, we need a polygon node, which again you can find in your hotbar. Bring a polygon node into empty space, don't connect it, because if you connect it up to anything, your image will disappear and you won't know what you're masking. So if you notice, the cursor has now changed to a little plus sign. So what we need to do is mask out this guy. So to do that, if you hold with your mouse over your image, hold the control key and scroll your middle mouse button, you can zoom in and out. You want to zoom in so you can see what you're doing. Let go of your control key and press and hold the middle mouse button to pan the image around. And now we're going to mask him out. You basically click to add a point and click to add more points, and you will work your way around the area that you want to mask. Now this bit I'm going to speed up because watching somebody else mask is not a fun thing to do. My mask will be fairly rough. I suggest you take as much time as you need to get a smooth mask. Once you get to your last point, make sure you click over the very first point. If you notice, the cursor changes from a plus sign to a circle with a plus sign, and that just closes the mask off. Okay, so we've got our polygon around our person. To use this to mask our image, we want two images from this. We want an image of the guy and we want an image of just the background. So take your guy media in and pipe a line to the yellow input of both matte controls. Now take an output from your polygon. If you right click and drag and just drop it on the matte control node, you get a menu of inputs, and you're looking for garbage matte. And you're going to do that for both matte controls. Now, if you view either of your matte controls, you can view a node by selecting it and hitting 1 or 2 on your keyboard. In this case, it's 2 because I've only got one viewer open. The other way to do it is you can just drag the node into the viewer, and that's the way I generally do it. Now you'll notice at the minute that both images are the same, but we want one to be the guy and one to be the background. So if you select your first matte control, the top one, come to the inspector, open the matte control controls and just check invert. So now our first top matte control is the guy and our bottom matte control is the background. Again, relabel. So select the first one, F2, call it cut or guy cut or something that makes sense. And then you can relabel the bottom one guy background. So now you know which is which. So at this point, there's various things that you can do to manipulate these images. After playing around for a while, I found the best way was to use a 3D scene. 3D scenes can be very complicated. In this case, they're not going to be. They'll be fairly simple, so don't worry too much. So if you come again to your hotbar, at the right hand side you've got all these nodes. These nodes are all 3D nodes, and you want the very first one, which is image plane 3D, and you want 2 of those, and you're going to pipe an output from guy cut into one image plane and guy background into the other image plane. Now if you drag the output from one onto the output of the other, it will create a 3D merge node. And if you now view this 3D merge node, you're in 3D space and you've got your complete image. To move around this 3D space, if you have your mouse in the viewer, scrolling the middle mouse wheel will just pan up and down. If you press and hold the control key or command key, it will zoom in and out. If you press and hold the alt or option key and then press and hold your middle mouse button, you can spin it around. So that's how you get to see things from different angles and different sizes. So I'm now going to switch back to 2 viewers, and I'm going to put my merge node into this viewer. After the merge node, you need a renderer 3D, which then converts everything back to a 2D image. So this is the very far right icon. Just click it with the merge selected, just click your renderer 3D and it adds it in. And we're back to our original image. But what we can now do is manipulate these image planes to get the animations that we want. So the guy cut image plane, if you select that, come to the inspector and go to transform. Now you've got all the controls for manipulating that image plane, and you can do things like rotate it, which is where we get the guy falling forwards or falling backwards from. But if you notice at the minute, when you rotate him, he's rotating from the middle, which isn't what we want. We need him rotating from the bottom. So to do that, we need to change the pivot point. So if you open the pivot controls, come to the Y slider or wheel or whatever it is, and we're going to bring it down. And if you notice, as I'm moving the control, the pivot indicator is also moving. And what we want to do is drop that so it's just at the bottom of the clip. What I found was a value of 0.89 or minus 0.89, puts it just where I need it. That may vary depending on your images, but for this particular clip, that works. So once you've got your pivot point in place, you can now come to the rotate and rotate around X, and we get the effect that we're after. So that has basically set up the first part of what we want to do. So now we need to repeat this process, but for the girls clip. One of the advantages of Fusion is that you can actually reuse nodes or copy nodes. If you want nodes to do the same thing, you can just copy them, and we do. So we need this setup, but for the girl, the only thing that will be different is the polygon. So what you can do is if you drag select all these nodes, hit Control C, click away and hit Control V, you will paste a copy of the same system. So what you would do is you would select your map controls, which are these two, and just rename them. Now, as I say, we're obviously going to need to make a new polygon because the polygon for the guy is going to be different to the polygon for the girl. So we will delete the guy's polygon off the bottom, bring in a new polygon node, put our girl's picture into the viewer, and then we will mask her the same as we did the guy. So zoom in and start masking. Again, once you get back to your last point, you need to click on your first point to close the mask. So now if we pipe, right click, select garbage map for both, and these are already set up because they're copies of these. So now you've got the girl on her own and the background on its own, and you've got the same image planes that you can now manipulate, again because we've already set the pivot point. Everything's in place and ready to go. So the next thing you need to be able to do is swap over your images. To do that, you're going to use a dissolve node, which isn't available on the hotbar. So to get your dissolve node, click anywhere in empty space, hit Shift and space bar, and then type dissolve. And this brings a dissolve node in. You pipe one of your renders into the yellow background input, one into the green foreground input, and now if you view your dissolve in the inspector, you can use this slider to switch between the two images. And now we need to start animating. Come to the image plane that's attached to your guy or your first clip. Go back to frame 0. Make sure this rotation is at 0. Come forward. So I'm on a 30 frame per second timeline, and this is a 1 second clip, so we've got 30 frames to play with. So come to frame 10 and set this value on the X rotation to -90. Set a keyframe. So to set a keyframe, you need to click the grey diamond so it turns red. Now if we go back to frame 0 and just reset this back to 0, that will automatically set a new keyframe. So now we have the guy falling back. It might be, looking at that you need to push it beyond -90, but you can have a play and see what kind of works. but around -90 should do the trick. Once you've got the guy falling back, we now need to zoom into this empty space. To zoom into the empty space, select your dissolve node, come to your hotbar, and you'll find transform. Just click transform so it adds a transform to the end, view the transform, and at frame 10, or maybe even before, set a keyframe, come forward to frame 20, set another keyframe, go back to frame 15, which is the middle of our transition, and pull the size up so that you end up with a transparent hole like so. Oh, missed the top there. Like so. So you've got your guy falls back and zooms in. At frame 15, where you've got nothing on the screen, come to your dissolve node, set a keyframe, go forward 1 frame, and drop the value to 0. So now we've switched over to our girl. For the girl, you want to come put her picture in, come to frame 20, come to the girl image plane, the girl cut image plane, and set the Y, or sorry, the X rotation so that she's off the screen. So somewhere around there. Set a keyframe, go to the last frame, and then just set this back to 0. And the girl's in. So at 15, when you transfer, if I was looking at the transform, it would help. So as you come through, everything disappears, and then the image changes between frame 15 and 16. So now when it zooms back out, we've actually got the girl's background, and the girl will come in and fill that hole. That's basically how the transition works. So now if we play it through, I'm currently viewing this transform node. He falls back, zooms in, zooms out, and she comes in. You can play around with your keyframes to get the timing how you want it. The other thing you can do is if you come to both render 3Ds, go to settings, and then just check motion blur so that it's turned on. Do that for both of your renderers. And then you can also do the same for your transform. Go to settings and just check motion blur. And now it will slow everything down because motion blur uses computer power, but it makes your animations look a bit nicer, especially when they're played at normal speed. At the minute they're not played at normal speed. In your motion blur, you can up the quality, play with the shutter angle to get nicer looking motion blur, but the higher the quality, the slower things are going to run. So once it's cached on the Fusion page, you see it in sort of real time, or nearer to real time. And that's basically the transition. As I say, you can play with your keyframing, you can play with your timing. Oh, the last thing to do, sorry, is to smooth out the animation so that it's less linear. If you come to the top of the screen and click the spline word, this opens the spline window here. And what you need to do is pick all the nodes that had animations on them. So the 2 image planes. If you select a node, hit and hold the control key, and then select another node, it group selects them. And you want the 2 image planes and the transform node check them all so that you get lines in this window. Come to this double-headed arrow that is zoomed to fit, and these are all your keyframes in your animations. Click one somewhere in the window, hit Control A to select all the keyframes, and then hit F or S on the keyboard, and it will just smooth the transitions out. So with all that done, take the output of your transform, connect it to media out. This sends this back to your timeline. Come to the top of the screen to the playback menu, select render cache, make sure it's set to smart or user so that it's on. You'll see this red line appear above your transition that gradually turns blue. Once it's turned blue, your animation should run, or your preview should run pretty smooth. And you can get more of a sense of how it looks. The other thing you can do at the minute, it just gives a black silhouette for your transparency. If you want that to be a different color, bring in a background node, disconnect transform from the media out, and connect the output of transform onto the background, and then connect the output of the merge back to the media out. If you come to this background, you can now make this background any color you want, and that's the color that will appear in your whole. It's very much an aesthetic thing. It depends how you want to do it. If you want black and you're happy with black, then that's fine. If you want a different color, then that's how you would do it. And that's basically the first transition in the example video that you gave. The basic setup would be used pretty much for all the others. The only things that would vary is what you are animating. So, for example, at this point where we're tipping the guy back, you could equally select the background image plane and use the rotate to manipulate that. So you can actually rotate your background and leave him static if you want. So that would give you the other sort of transitions. It's just a combination of flipping the background or flipping the character, however you want to play it. But that's the basic setup you need for all the transitions in the examples. It's just a case of which bits you're manipulating. As usual, please feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks a lot.